Kira woke up to the sound of her mother's voice calling from the kitchen. "Come on, Kira. It's time to get up, sweetheart," Ashley said, her tone warm but slightly weary. Kira rubbed her eyes and swung her legs over the edge of the bed, wincing as the cold wooden floor sent a small shiver through her. From the next room, she could hear her little brother Tony's soft breathing through the thin walls. He was still asleep, blissfully unaware of the day ahead. In the kitchen, Ashley stood by the stove, stirring a small pot of oatmeal. The smell wafted through the air, filling the room with a simple but comforting warmth. Despite everything, Ashley always made sure her children had breakfast. It didn't matter how tight money was. She found a way. "Morning, Mom," Kira greeted. Sitting at the small kitchen table, her eyes darted to Tony's cereal bowl, noticing there was just enough for him. Ashley smiled at her, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Morning, sweetheart. Eat up. You'll need your energy today," Ashley said, setting a bowl of oatmeal in front of her. Though her tone was cheerful, her face bore the lines of sleepless nights and endless worry. Kira hesitated, her spoon hovering over the bowl. "Mom, are you going to be late again tonight?" Ashley's expression faltered briefly, and she turned back to the stove, avoiding Kira's eyes. "Yeah, probably," she admitted, her voice soft. "There's a lot I need to catch up on, but I'll try to be home before bedtime, I promise." Kira nodded silently, not wanting to press further. She focused on finishing her oatmeal, the lump in her throat making it difficult to swallow. She wanted to say something, anything, that might make her mom feel better, but no words came. As Ashley washed the dishes, Kira noticed her speaking quietly into her phone. Words like rent and delay floated into the room. Kira quickly looked away when Ashley glanced back, forcing a small smile to hide her concern. "Go get your uniform on, sweetheart," Ashley said, her voice brisk. "You're going to be late for school." Obediently, Kira went to her room and pulled on her patched school uniform. She stood in front of the small mirror, adjusting it and tying her braids a little tighter. Taking a deep breath, she walked back into the kitchen. By then, Tony was awake, giggling as he clumsily climbed into his chair. "Hey, Tony," Kira greeted with a smile, ruffling his hair. She helped him settle at the table and handed him his cereal. Tony's bright laughter lightened her mood, if only a little. "I'll get him ready, Mom," Kira offered. Ashley paused, looking at her daughter with gratitude. "Thanks, baby," she said softly. She bent down to kiss Tony on the forehead, then kissed Kira's cheek. "You're both so good to me." Kira noticed the way her mom's voice cracked slightly and the glisten in her eyes as she quickly turned away. Moments later, Ashley was rushing out the door with her bag slung over her shoulder. "Lock it behind me, okay?" Ashley called out as she left. "Okay, Mom. Be safe," Kira replied, her voice steady despite the heaviness she felt inside. As the door closed, the apartment grew quiet. Kira lingered for a moment, staring at the spot where her mom had just been. The air in the room felt heavier now, as if the silence carried the weight of their struggles. At school, Kira found it hard to focus. Normally, she paid close attention in class, but today her mind kept wandering. Images of her mom's tired face and the stack of overdue bills on the kitchen table played over and over in her head. By the time the last bell rang, she felt completely drained. Walking home, her backpack seemed heavier than usual. When she entered the apartment, she found Ashley already there, sitting on the couch with her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was shaky, and Kira could tell she was talking about money again. Kira watched silently as her mom hung up the phone and buried her face in her hands. Ashley's small frame seemed so fragile, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her. "Mom," Kira whispered, taking a hesitant step closer. Ashley didn't look up. "Just give me a minute, sweetie, please," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Kira nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She wanted to help but didn't know how. After a long pause, she asked softly, "Can I go to the park after school tomorrow?" Ashley finally looked up, wiping her face quickly. "Sure, sweetheart. Just be back before dark, okay?" Kira nodded, her heart heavy as she retreated to her room. She couldn't shake the feeling that their small apartment was filled with invisible burdens, weighing them all down. The next day, Kira found solace at the park. She sat on her favorite bench under the big oak tree, pulling out her lunch. The laughter of children playing nearby filled the air, but it felt distant to her. Her thoughts kept circling back to her mom, the tired lines on her face, the quiet desperation in her voice. That's when Kira noticed him. A man was sitting on a bench across from hers, hunched over with his head in his hands. His clothes were wrinkled, and his shoulders shook slightly. He was crying. Kira hesitated, unsure of what to do. She had never seen a grown-up cry before, at least not like this. Something about it tugged at her heart. She glanced at her sandwich, then back at the man. Before she could second-guess herself, she stood up and walked over to him. Excuse me, she said softly. The man looked up, startled. His eyes were red, his face lined with exhaustion. Do you want this? Kira held out half of her sandwich. The man blinked, as if trying to process her offer. You don't have to, he said, his voice rough. It's okay, Kira insisted. I have enough. You look like you could use it. His hands trembled as he accepted the sandwich. Thank you, he whispered, his voice cracking. Tears filled his eyes again. But this time they seemed softer, less full of pain. Kira sat down beside him, her feet swinging slightly. What's your name? She asked. The man hesitated before answering. Daniel. What's yours? Kira, she replied with a small smile. Are you okay, Daniel? Daniel let out a shaky breath. Not really, he admitted. Life, it gets hard sometimes. Kira nodded, her expression thoughtful. Yeah, I know. My mom says things get better, though, even if it doesn't feel like it. Daniel looked at her, his eyes wide with surprise. Your mom sounds like a smart woman. She tries, Kira said with a shrug. Things are hard for us too, but she never stops trying. Daniel's lips trembled into a small smile. You're a good kid, Kira. Thank you. You didn't have to do this, but you did. They sat in silence for a while, sharing a moment that felt bigger than words. When Daniel finally stood, he looked at her with gratitude. I hope things get better for you and your mom, he said. Kira nodded. You too. As Daniel walked away, Kira felt a small spark of hope light inside her. It wasn't much, but it was enough to hold on to. The next day, Kira couldn't shake the feeling of hope Daniel had sparked. It wasn't something she could explain in words, but it lingered in her heart, giving her a sense of comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. She didn't tell her mom about the encounter, at least, not yet. Instead, she focused on helping around the house. She made small efforts, like tidying up the apartment and keeping Tony entertained, hoping it would make things just a little easier for Ashley. That afternoon, while Kira and Tony were playing quietly in the living room, there was a knock at the door. Ashley frowned, wiping her hands on a dish towel as she went to open it. Kira paused mid-game, her curiosity piqued. When Ashley opened the door, a man stood on the porch. Kira froze in surprise. It was Daniel. He looked different today. His clothes were cleaner, and his posture was more confident, though he still carried an air of humility. Hi, Daniel said, his voice warm but hesitant. I'm Daniel. Is this Kira's home? Ashley glanced back at Kira, her eyes narrowing slightly in confusion. Yes, she said cautiously. Can I help you? Daniel hesitated, then took a deep breath. Actually, I was hoping I could help you. Ashley's brow furrowed in suspicion. What do you mean? Daniel stepped inside slowly, his gaze sweeping over the small, modest living room. His expression was thoughtful, but there was no judgment in his eyes, only kindness. I know this might seem strange, he began carefully, but your daughter did something incredible. She saw me at my lowest and helped me when I didn't think anyone would. I want to repay that kindness if I can. Ashley's eyes softened, but her tone remained guarded. How exactly do you want to help? Daniel met her gaze earnestly. I noticed you might be struggling with rent, he said gently. I'd like to cover it for a few months, just to give you some breathing room. Ashley's mouth fell open slightly, and she shook her head almost instinctively. I can't accept that. It's too much. It's not charity, Daniel said, his voice steady but kind. It's just a way to pay forward what Kira gave me. A little kindness when I needed it most. Ashley's shoulders slumped, her eyes glistening with tears she tried to hold back. She looked at Kira, who was standing silently by the couch, her face a mixture of hope and hesitation. Finally, Ashley nodded, her voice breaking. "Okay," she said softly. "Thank you." In the weeks that followed, things began to change. With the rent covered, Ashley was able to cut back on her work hours. She finally had time to enroll in a bookkeeping course at the community center, something she had always wanted to do but could never afford. Kira stepped up even more at home. She took on small tasks like folding laundry and helping Tony with his homework. Every little thing she did felt like a way to lighten her mom's load, even if just a little. Daniel visited occasionally, becoming more than just a passing stranger. He would bring groceries or stop by to check in on the family. His presence was a quiet reassurance, a reminder that kindness could ripple outwards and make a real difference. Slowly but surely, the weight on Ashley's shoulders began to lift. One evening, as Ashley sat at the kitchen table reviewing her course notes, she looked over at Kira, who was helping Tony color in a picture. The dim light of the kitchen cast a warm glow over them, and for the first time in a long while, Ashley felt a glimmer of peace. "You know," she said softly, her voice breaking the comfortable silence, "we're going to be okay. Things are going to get better." Kira looked up at her mom, her heart swelling with pride and relief. "I know, Mom. We're going to be okay." For the first time in what felt like forever, they both believed it. The transformation wasn't immediate, but it was steady. With her newfound skills from the bookkeeping course, Ashley began applying for better-paying jobs. The gap between their struggles and their dreams started to narrow. Daniel, true to his word, stayed in touch with the family. He never overstepped, always keeping his actions humble and genuine. He often reminded Kira that her small act of kindness had been the spark that changed everything, not just for him, but for them all. As the days turned into months, laughter began to fill the apartment again. Kira noticed that her mom smiled more often. The lines of worry on her face began to fade, replaced by a quiet determination and newfound hope. One day, as Kira sat on the same bench under the oak tree where she had first met Daniel, she thought about how much her life had changed. She thought about her mom's unwavering strength, Tony's bright laughter, and Daniel's unexpected kindness. Most of all, she thought about how a single moment, a sandwich shared with a stranger, had set everything into motion. Kira smiled to herself, her heart full of gratitude. Life wasn't perfect, but it was better. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like the future was something to look forward to, not fear. As she walked home that evening, the sun setting behind her, Kira felt a quiet sense of pride. She had learned something important. Kindness, no matter how small, could change lives. And sometimes, it could even save them.